and there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. And welcome to another fantastic installment from very high above all the puerile and insipid forms of Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Wednesday. Just to give you a roadmap for the coming days on the program, we won't be having Cowboy State Politics tomorrow or Friday. It's very difficult for me to be in two places at once. I'll probably be making a trip to Laramie tomorrow, so that I can go to another event. And, you know, if I could move the whole studio with me, I would. But
what happened to Mr. Omnipresent?
Well, I am omnipresent.
You can't have it both ways.
Yes, I can. Except for tomorrow and Friday. But anyway, so no, we won't be having a program tomorrow or Friday. I'll be on the road. But I'll catch you all up on Tuesday's edition of the live show and then probably on the podcast. Also, as it relates to that, we've been working on a new show. I say we, but me and a couple of my pals. It's called Politics Reloaded, and you can find it at politicsreloaded.substack.com. It's a deep dive, long-form podcast that delves into all sorts of national and state issues. And when I say state, I don't necessarily mean Wyoming. Wyoming's included in there sometimes, but it's stories that you didn't hear about across the country, and we do it. Each show is about an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes long. So all 3 episodes are posted right now, so go check them out.
Wanted to mention that there's a forthcoming lawsuit from Tony and myself.
Oh, is there?
Yeah, we had Locked and Loaded, and now you've got Reloaded. So
yeah, well, you know, we're all a bunch of gun nuts. Which, by the way, on today's program, we're going to talk a little bit of firearms, and it's all about debanking, and it's This is a conversation that's been going on a long time. So we'll talk about that on today's show, as well as what the heck is dark woke? I know. It's another idiotic term from the left.
You keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
Oh, I'm pretty sure I know what idiotic means there, Agent 29. But anyway, we'll talk about that in today's program. But we're going to begin with spending. And I know, I complain about this all the time on the program, but there's only a couple of things that government does. One of the big ones is spend your money. And the trick is to get them to spend the least amount possible and to let you spend more of your money. But it would seem that municipalities all across the state just can't stop spending. From the Wyoming turkey vulture, city to consider smaller solid waste fee increase and fund appropriations. And I quote, several items will come before Cheyenne City Council in the coming weeks, including another solid waste fee schedule rate increase and city employee compensation increases through a reappropriation of the fiscal year budget. Couple of things there. First, have you ever noticed that city and county employees tend to make a lot more than you do? Have you noticed that all the time they're getting pay increases and bonuses and stipends and all sorts of things well beyond what they would get in the private sector? Well, it's because we live in a state that is consumed by government. And the truth is that in most Wyoming towns, most of your employees are government. Now, you'll notice that I have a couple qualifiers in there. It's because it's not all cities and towns; it's just most of them. So, for example, in Buffalo, Wyoming, a conservative estimate is that 75% of the populace works for government in one form or another. Think about this: the BLM, the Forest Service, city, county, state, all of the teachers, and it's only a town of about 4,800 people. So, yeah, most of the people work for government in one way or another. And so, when you ask the question, why can't they stop spending? Well, it's because they continually give themselves pay raises. And, the argument is always, well, we have to keep these valuable employees. If we don't pay them, then they'll go get a job in the private sector. Good.
The belief and the excuse in the Cheyenne area is that there's a belief that this state has to have every government service that any other
Absolutely.
state has.
Yep.
But we've got the total population of a small city and an entire state to cover. So it's no wonder that we're all government.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the thing. There is this belief, and I think that the left has been very, very successful in pushing this falsehood that the government should pay for every kind of service that is humanly possible. When in reality, the Constitution, our founders, and even Wyoming's founders realized that it is not government that creates wealth. It is not government that you need controlling your life. With liberty and freedom comes personal responsibility, and that's not government's job. We can't have it. And Ken, you said it in the beginning of the program. You can't have it both ways. You can't have all of these services and at the same time have your freedom, because, and this is one of the central points of the Republican Party platform, that your economic freedom is inextricably tied to your personal liberty. Like, if you don't have freedom to buy things and spend your money the way that you want, well, then you really don't have any freedom at all. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit in more depth here in the program, but I just want to talk about spending for a minute.
You keep hitting on hot button issues, and I've said, you've heard me say many times publicly, if you cede responsibility, if you give up responsibility for something, for example, your own health care, you give up a chunk of liberty. And that's true with everything. So the more things you turn over to government, the Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away.
Absolutely. And when we rely on the government, your personal liberty goes down. And it doesn't really matter what it is, whether it's health care or whatever. And you see this a lot in smaller towns, but there's all sorts of things called nuisance ordinances. And these are the things that try to force you to keep up your lawn, to keep your front yard free of trash. And while we will all probably argue that that's a good thing, nobody wants to live in a neighborhood that's all junked up, except Agent 29. I always tell him that his neighborhood is probably the most interesting one that I've ever been around. You can sit on his front porch, and pretty soon something crazy is going to happen. And it's simply because of the neighborhood he lives in. It's not junked up. It's just the different neighborhood. But all of these nuisance ordinances are in place to force people to do what they don't want to do personally. So, for example, in Buffalo, and I know I keep referring to Buffalo, but I grew up there, I lived most of my life there. So, I mean, it's a pretty good frame of reference. But there's an ordinance that you can't have your grass any more than 8 inches tall. Now, there's probably some good reasons for that, fire and all of that. But the government forces you to mow your grass. You can't have a vehicle parked out in your driveway while you're working on it, or for fear of the of the nuisance police coming and telling you that you have to remove it. But the point here is that it would be so much easier if you, as a neighbor, walked over and had a conversation with your neighbor and said, I don't really care for the rooster that you have in your backyard. Could we come to some sort of arrangement? It wakes me up at 4:00 in the morning, and I don't really appreciate that. We have lost the ability to talk to one another, and we have replaced that with the force of government. And it comes in all forms. And, we tend to think of government force as the police. The police are making you drive the speed limit, or at least when you break the speed limit, they're the ones that are pulling you over and giving you a ticket. But government force also comes in the form of spending. Back to the turkey vulture. And I quote, "The items, among others, were discussed Tuesday at the City Council's Finance Committee meeting. Craig Lavoie, Deputy Director of Cheyenne's Public Works Department, told committee members that the Wyoming Department of Environmental Quality requires municipalities to update their integrated solid waste management plan every 10 years as part of the cost for accounting conducted in 2019. Now, this includes, and this is the part I'm getting to here, this includes a 1% increase for residential trash and recycling, 3% for commercial trash, 5% for commercial recycling, 2% for transfer station disposal, 3% for roll-off containers, and 1% for yard waste services. Now, where do you suppose most of that money goes? Well, it goes to your trash pickup, and it also goes to recycling. Now, the reason why I hit on this is most cities and towns have convinced you that you have to recycle. In fact, in Sheridan, there are recycling bins everywhere. At our house, there's a blue one. You put your recycled stuff in the blue one, and then they haul it away. But the question is, where does that recycling stuff go? Well, first, it costs, and I guess I should explain this first. Recycling is horribly expensive. It is the part of government that we have created that is a vast black hole of money. You will never make any money on recycling. Most of what you recycle ends up in the landfill. And if not our landfill, other people's landfill, which I suppose if you can export your garbage to other places, then you don't have to worry about it. But the truth is that no city will ever make any money on it. It is just something to feel good. Well, we're saving the environment. We're saving Mother Earth. We have to recycle all of the plastic in the ocean. Well, the truth is that most of that ends up in the landfill anyway, and it never gets recycled. But the question is, what do you do with all of that cardboard? Because cardboard, by far, is one of the biggest problems in a city, believe it or not. Again, back to Buffalo, that little town creates about 1,200 pounds of cardboard every single day. It's one of those big bales. You see them stacked just about, in any town, you'll see a stack of cardboard. That's about 1,200 pounds. But every day, city the size of Sheridan probably produces 6 or 7 of those every day. Well, where does it go? Well, presumably, you recycle your cardboard and you think that it gets sold. But the truth is, it probably sits around and then the city has to haul it off. And sometimes you can sell it, sometimes you can't. But the point is that the whole recycling outfit, the whole boondoggle really is what it is, never makes any money. And it is a giant waste of money. And so if the city of Cheyenne wanted to stop the fee increases, all they would have to do is be honest with their citizens that this whole recycling thing is a big waste of time and money. And it really doesn't do any good anyway. But the bigger problem then, though, and Ken, you mentioned this just a little bit ago, we seem to think that we need services for every single thing, and we have to continue spending. Anytime there's a budget crunch, like this article from the Turkey Vulture explains, well, we have to find a way to pay for it. I have an excellent idea. Why don't you stop spending money on recycling, and then perhaps you can pay for the things that you want?
I think one of the things that I was always taught about living in Wyoming is you're responsible for yourself. You don't have an ambulance 5 minutes away. you learn to think ahead, to provide for yourself, because these services aren't there. And that's kind of that, I don't know, a pioneering spirit that I was raised with. My granddad, we were talking about this a little bit ago. My granddad taught me all kinds of skills, from welding and everything else, because you take care of yourself. And we are losing that. And I like your comment about we don't talk to anybody anymore. We don't learn anything anymore because somebody down the street will do it and the government will pay for it.
Exactly right. Or the government will force your neighbor to do it. Or here's a better idea. Maybe if you don't like the junked up car that's sitting in your neighbor's driveway, you walk over and say, hey, do you want some help fixing that car? Why don't we talk to each other? Why don't we stop spending? And why don't we stop letting the government do everything for us? And if we don't, you can expect that you're just going to continue seeing fee increases to take away your trash, which, by the way, you should go thank your trash guy. Think about what'll happen if he goes on strike. Your neighbor's yard is bad. Just think about what yours is going to look like. We'll be back in a minute. You are listening to Cowboy State Politics Live. You can listen to the program on YouTube, on Facebook, on X, on Rumble, pretty much everywhere. It's almost like I'm omnipresent. If you miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics Live, you can always go to the live replay, which is located at the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, under the live replay button. You can listen to Cowboy State Politics Live every Tuesday through Friday at 8 a.m. You can listen to the Cowboy State Politics podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest place is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles that I might bring up during the course of a program. That way, if your name is Joe Biden and you can't remember if you had your pudding today, well, I probably can't help you with that, but I can definitely tell you why you should have never ran for president. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics Live, doing what I was born to do each and every day with talent given to me by God himself. Welcome back to the program, my friends. And now, the segment that we don't do nearly often enough.
Willy-nilly.
No, it's not willy-nilly. It's things that go boom.
That's right.
I love that soundbite. Now, tell me, my friends, if any of this sounds familiar. Bill targets Indiana treasurer who stops banks from canceling Christians and gun owners. Does any of that sound familiar? Maybe I haven't taken you far enough back in the Wayback Machine. Back in 2021, Bob Nicholas sponsored an amendment to the budget in Wyoming. It was footnote 13, and basically what it did is it removed the treasurer's ability to invest our funds, our sovereign wealth fund. Now, of course, it was defeated, and this is nothing new from Bob Nicholas. He's tried it and been successful, kind of, multiple times. Of course, we no longer have an auditor that audits anything. It's true, you do vote for a state auditor, but the weird part about it is she doesn't audit anything. She's pretty much a glorified payroll clerk. It was attempted with Cindy Hill, the Secretary of Public Instruction, to remove all of her ability with Senate File 104. That one went all the way to the Supreme Court and was overturned. And then in 2021, Bob Nicholas tried it again with Kurt Meyer and tried to remove all of his ability to manage our finances. From the Federalist, Indiana's treasurer helped push banks to back down on canceling conservatives, and now a banker-backed bill would strip his office's power. Indiana state treasurer repeatedly stood against big banks canceling accounts and releasing customer data of Christians and conservatives for viewpoint discrimination. A pending must-pass bill in Indiana's Republican-led legislature would strip some of the treasurer Daniel Elliott's powers and could give them to straight up the banks. A measure currently part of the state budget negotiations. See, like I said, does any of this sound familiar? To conclude on April 29th, would demote Elliott from manager of a $3 billion local government investment fund to one of a 5-member board managing that fund. 3 other members of the board would be banking executives. The 5th would be a director of Indiana's Department of Financial Institutions, the state banking regulator. Now, the reason I bring this up is big banks, and there's a whole list of them in here. Let me see if I can find it. But Wells Fargo, Citibank, Bank of America, a whole bunch of them have been for a very long time monitoring the purchases of conservatives, and based on those purchases have been debanking them. One of the most prominent ones recently was Donald Trump. During the election, it was one of the big issues where one of the big banks that he does business with completely debanked him. What debanking is seizing your bank accounts. Now, one of the more recent ones that you may have heard of was during the trucker strike in Canada. And a whole bunch of people that donated to that cause had their bank accounts seized. Go ahead and play cut number 1 for us.
Dr. Peterson, I want you to talk about the debanking issue we saw so much of, and how that was, particularly, I guess, with the truckers, and how that's, because I see it coming. I see it coming here, and it frightens me. I want you to talk about what took place in Canada, and if it in any way impacted you.
Well, there was essentially a working class protest against the extensive length of the COVID lockdowns. And one consequence of that was that Canadians who participated, even by donating to the protest and even by donating small amounts to the protest, had their bank accounts seized in consequence of a collusion between the banks and the government that was extrajudicial, that was recently deemed unconstitutional.
I like Jordan Peterson, but I think we got the point here, that even individual citizens had their bank accounts seized. Now, you might say, well, that's Canada. Those communists up there, that would never happen here, which is a common phrase I hear at the Wyoming legislature all the time. Well, that's, we need to focus on Wyoming solutions for Wyoming problems. That's not a Wyoming problem. It's not happening here. Well, one so-called attempt to deal with this issue happened, I think it was last year. It was Senate File 105. It was a bill sponsored by Dan Larson that would have prohibited financial institutions from tracking your gun purchases and your ammunition. And the way that they do this is through what are called, I think they're called customer codes. So basically, when you go in and you purchase a firearm, which, by the way, you should never purchase a gun with a credit card. Ever, 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 ever. Don't ever use a card to purchase a gun. Go to the bank, get some cash, go pay for it in cash. But anyway, a lot of financial institutions were tracking those purchases and then saving that data and turning it over to the FBI. Now, this was brought up in an oversight hearing. This is actually the one that Harriet Hageman was on, the Committee Against the Weaponization of Government, I think it was called. But this is from an interim staff report on the Judiciary Committee from the Select Committee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government. And of course, by now, this is about a year old, but I wanted to read it to you, or at least part of it. And I quote, "The Committee on the Judiciary and its Select Subcommittee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government are charged by the House of Representatives with upholding fundamental American liberties. On February 7th, 2023, the Committee and Select Committee received testimony from retired FBI Supervisory Intelligence Analyst George Hill. During his transcribed interview, Mr. Hill testified that following the events of the U.S. Capitol riot on January 6th, Bank of America voluntarily and without legal process provided the FBI with a list of names of all of the individuals who used a BOA credit or debit card in Washington, D.C. region between the dates of January 5th and January 7th. Mr. Hill also testified that his BOA data dump of customer information included lists of individuals who had ever used a Bank of America credit or debit card to purchase, you guessed it, a firearm, regardless of when or where it was purchased. The testimony later confirmed by another former senior FBI official, Joseph Bonavolanta. In fact, when the BOA information was brought to the attention of Stephen Jensen, the then section chief of BOA's Domestic Terrorism Operations Section, he acted to pull the Bank of America information from the FBI systems. Okay, so this stuff happens with Bank of America. And if you read on, and here's the list I was thinking of, just listen to this list of banks. Barclays, U.S. Bank, Charles Schwab, HSBC, Bank of America, PayPal. How many of us use PayPal to purchase stuff? KeyBank, Standard Chartered, Western Union. The list goes on. As Paul Harvey would say, page 2. Wells Fargo, Citibank, JP Morgan Chase, among others. So pretty much any of the big banks were tracking your gun purchases, and that information was directly given to the FBI. And again, remember, the report said regardless of when or where it was purchased. And so let's go back to Senate File 105 from last year. Now, this bill, it was purported that this bill would stop credit card companies from collecting this data and then turning it over to authorities. The problem is the bill didn't do anything, not a dang thing. There was no enforcement mechanism in it. Really, all the bill said was, now it's illegal, which it was argued on that side. Well, now it's illegal. Of course they can't do it. Yeah, but where's the penalty? What is going to stop financial institutions from tracking your gun purchases? Which, by the way, I don't know if I have to remind you or not, but the Second Amendment pretty much says shall not be infringed. Oh no, it's not pretty much. That's absolutely what it says. But the Senate File 105, which was touted by some gun groups in the state of Wyoming, literally did absolutely nothing. Now, there was an attempt in this past legislative session to go in and add a penalty to that bill, a criminal penalty. And I think that there was an attempt to add a civil penalty on top of it, but not sure on that last part. That bill was killed by the ultra super duper conservative Senate. So please tell me how a group of gun-loving folks that are allegedly conservative killed a bill that would have prevented your gun purchases from being tracked and turned over to the FBI. Well, the truth of the matter is that's absolutely not a conservative thing to do. And, I started out the program talking about government power. This is the center of government power right here. If you want to know what happens to your liberties when you cede them to the government, it's easy. They track your gun purchases. They know exactly when and where you buy stuff. And think about this. We're always told that we can't have a gun registry, that we absolutely 100% can't have a list of people who own firearms. Well, what is this, my friends? It's exactly a list of gun purchases. And so the reason I bring up this bill from Indiana, it is exactly the same thing that was happening in Wyoming. Now, of course, at the time, Bob Nicholas didn't say that it had anything to do with firearms, but gun grabbers being what they are, that that's where it was headed. But the big question is, what do we do about it? Well, easy. You've got to keep electing conservatives, people who think that the Constitution actually means something, and stop electing these rhino redcoats that tell you they love guns when in reality they go to Cheyenne. And even though they may be part of an alleged gun group, they're the folks that sponsor a bill that does absolutely bubkiss. Absolutely nothing. And interestingly enough, all of the criticism about the first SEPA bill was that, the penalty is not strong enough. This isn't going to force anybody to do anything. Okay, what about the bill that protects your gun purchases? I mean, if you ask me, and again, your financial liberty is inextricably tied to your personal liberty. If you don't have the freedom to go purchase a gun, well, you don't have any freedom at all. You literally do not have the right to protect yourself, which is why I tell you again, don't ever purchase a gun with a credit card. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. So, my friends, this is the center of American liberty. Anytime you see this, you've got to fight against it. And even if it's alleged conservative people, make sure that they're passing legislation that actually does something. Don't let them off the hook. We'll be back in a minute. It's spring-ish in Wyoming. Well, what that means for the uninitiated is that it's going to be 70 degrees one day and then snow 1.5 feet the next. And really, if you don't like those two options, just wait a little bit. The weather will change. I know it sounds a little stressful, but really you should put your mind at ease and buy a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They'll keep you warm and dry even on the nastiest, coldest spring-ish day, and they'll keep you cool and dry even when it's 75 and sunny. To get you a pair, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you're not going to be disappointed. Are you one of those people that said something like this before Trump became president?
I have a house in Spain that is going to be ready right after the election.
Siberia,
Nova Scotia.
I'm definitely moving to Canada.
Straight to hell. Iceland.
France.
Asia's pretty cool.
And has the past 5 weeks just been more than you could bear? If that's the case, you have come to the right place. All you need to do is call my friend Rebecca Bextel at Compass Real Estate. She has her fingers on the pulse of the real estate market all across the state of Wyoming. Last year, she sold around $30 million worth of property, everything from small residential properties all the way up to big giant ranches. So if you've got to get the heck out of Dodge, if you've got to be gone Johnson because you can't stand that Trump is the president, call Rebecca Bextel. Her phone number is 307-699-3519. Let me say that one more time for you in case you missed it. 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. I've never felt the freedom like I do. I'm stronger every day. I'm only gonna get stronger.
This program is only going to continue to get stronger. You can listen to it watch it on YouTube, on Facebook, on X, and on Rumble. Don't forget about the Cowboy State Politics podcast, which will be published as soon as I can get it out right after today's program. Welcome back to the show, my friends. It's Wednesday on Cowboy State Politics Live, and we are burning through another busy broadcast hour. Have you heard the term dark woke? I realize anything with that W word in it, you kind of try to ignore, at least. Spooky, yeah. Spooky music. When I first started the program, anytime I would mention the word Frontier Republican, I would play the spooky music. Twilight Zone. I absolutely love it. Anyway, so the left has started using this term dark woke, and it is absolutely akin to the stupid W word. But this is from the Free Republic, which is, I kind of consider this sort of an online blog. I mean, they're kind of splitting the hair between blog and news source, but it's an interesting article. And it's really hard to explain what this dumb, dark woke stuff is. But Jeff Charles gives it a try. And I quote, Democrats are scrambling to craft new strategies to get back into power after their ignominious defeat. That's a good word there. Ignominious defeat in 2024. Folks on the left have finally decided to give up on identity politics and focus on solutions. Okay, I can't finish this sentence with a straight face, but I tried. And that should count for something, shouldn't it? The truth is, Democrats continue to show that they have failed to learn their lessons after Republicans beat them like Mike Tyson whooped Peter McNeely in last year's elections. Instead of looking inward and figuring out where they all went wrong, the left is jumping headfirst into the definition of insanity, thinking things might just be a little bit different next time. Now, you hear this from the left all of the time when they're talking about socialism. Oh, and by the way, since we're talking about socialism, the left, Frontier Republicans, all of them, if you want to be part of the program, the phone number is 307-374-8989. I went ahead and opened up the phone lines. So if you if you want to opine on this one, go ahead and give me a call. 307-374-8989. Well, ladies and germs, this is where the dark woke phenomenon has emerged. The New York Times, as well as other media outlets, have touted this supposed change as a way to get the left their groove back. As liberals try to get their groove back, some party insiders say Democratic politicians have been encouraged to embrace a new form of combative rhetoric aimed at winning back voters who have responded to President Trump's no-holds-barred version of politics. It's an attempt to step outside the bounds of political correctness that Republicans have accused Democrats of establishing, and it requires being crass but discerning, Rude, but only to a point. Online, it has a name: dark woke. Now, here's the problem. Have you ever ran into somebody who is inherently unfunny and they have tried to be funny and the jokes all fall flat? Shut up, Mr. Producer. It's not me. I'm hilarious. And maybe that in and of itself is funny. But anyway, it's a person pretending to be something that they're not. And the reason why it's effective for Donald Trump is that's who he is, making up nicknames for people, being sort of caustic at some points, but in a funny sort of way. And the best example I can give you is when he's talking about the fake news. He's up on stage at one of his rallies. Of course, he doesn't really have too much time for rallies right about now. But anyway, he'll point out, hey, look at all the fake news in the back. All those red lights. Oh, they all went off. And it's not necessarily caustic, but it is kind of pointing out the derision that most people have for the mainstream media. And, Pocahontas, there's several nicknames he have. Low energy Jeb Bush, which, by the way, we may have a low energy candidate in Wyoming. I don't know. Probably more than a couple of them. My point is that that's Donald Trump, right? He's crass. He's a New Yorker. He's kind of funny, and he never pretends to be something that he's not. Democrats, on the other hand, are in my experience, inherently not funny. And this dark woke business is an attempt to be crass and funny at the same time, and it's just not working.
Not only are they not funny, they have no sense of humor.
No, they don't.
and that's what's missing. So I think maybe if we could find some way to graft in a funny bone, we could turn a lot of people more conservative.
Well, I think so. And, we probably shouldn't complain about them being not funny because it ends up getting us more votes. But a former digital director of the Wisconsin Democrat Party told the New York Times that the GOP, quote, has essentially put Democrats in a respectability prison, and that there is an extreme imbalance in strategy that allows Republicans to say stuff that really grabs voters' attention, where we're stuck at saying boring pablum. Pablum, another great word. But an example of this, and I don't know if you saw this, Agent 29, but there was a video that AOC put out, and she's standing in front of her office door, and she's just slugging away. I don't know. I mean, I can't even watch it. It's so ridiculous. But the whole idea was, choose your fighter. Then there was another video of several different Democrats doing very similar things. Well, the whole thing fell absolutely flat.
You remember, I think it was Bill Clinton walking along giggling, and then, oh yeah, we're supposed to be at a funeral. The camera's on. Ooh,
yeah, exactly
sad.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all show and no go, all hat and no cattle. And nothing is real. And I think that's the problem with the left is it's like they've lost some sort of a sense of reality.
Yes.
And if you think God is real, well, there you've got it.
Oh man, there's so many times I watch stuff online or I see it in person. At the protest, I just had to look up and go, man, you do have a sense of humor, don't you? Well, the truth is, and I think that you hit the nail on the head, Ken, that it is authenticity is the problem with the American left. None of what they argue for is actually real. None of their ideas work in the real world. And so when they try to float them, that's why they don't fly with voters. And the advantage that most conservative Republicans have is that we're honest, that we really don't engage in all the falsehood. And it's the reason why I say most.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I noticed you said most.
Yeah, most. I mean, people who are largely conservative, but generally are.
You want the whole list or just the top 10?
But the point is that Donald Trump is honest. And a lot of Republicans and Rand Paul is good at this. John Kennedy, he's one of my favorites. But they're honest. And the reason and the problem is that Democrats are not. Dark woke is particularly an online phenomenon, at least for now. It can trace its origins back to the days when leftists dubbed former President Joe Biden as Dark Brandon. That's another thing that fell flat. You remember all those memes that came out? I mean, if you pay attention to social media, X for probably specifically on that one. But you'll notice that they all fell flat. And which Democrat darlings best exemplifies the dark woke trope today? Let me give you 3 guesses, and you probably only need one. That's it. Jamie Crockett. Now, this woman, and notice I didn't say lady, is the low-rent version of AOC, who is more interested in snappy sound bites and cringe-worthy performances on the House floor than actually pushing policy. Crockett has made a spectacle of herself on numerous occasions. She famously told Elon Musk to F off and ranted about white tears. I have to say, if Democrats want to beclown themselves with this dark woke movement, they couldn't have had a better figurehead than a profanity-using, code-switching, heavy eyelash-wearing Crockett. Now, just take a look at her pretending to be a very serious lawmaker because she's, quote, truly a black woman. Well, the truth is she is black. She doesn't have to try to say that I am the authentic black. Yet, Democrats seem to be highly enthused with Crockett's brand of political theater, according to the New York Times. Ms. Crockett's moment became a meme. It was printed on T-shirts. It got her an appearance on Jimmy Kimmel. Why anyone would not want to go on that unfunny show, I have no idea. And now, Democratic strategists say it has become a perfect example of the dark woke. The reach of Ms. Crockett's comments seemed to show that Democratic clapbacks permeate into cultural spaces, giving the leaders who delivered them new platforms to spread their ideas to a new, younger generation of Democratic staffers. This was exactly the link they needed to, and they had to be seen. They're exploiting their opponents. Quote, all of these staffers grew up seeing extremely vile content overflowing from right-wing spaces into regular spaces. And all right, so here's the thing. Is all of the rhetoric that comes from conservatives, vile and disgusting? And I mean, use any adjective that you want, but is it truly that? No. When I was down at the protest this past weekend, I heard all sorts of epithets shouted at conservatives. Granted, most conservatives decided not to pay them any interest whatsoever, but I had to go down there to document the affair. But all of the rhetoric, a lot of the signs were in and of themselves vile. So when Democrats accuse Republicans of being nasty or vile or disgusting or any of those things, those attacks fall flat because in the general public, they know that that's not true. Let me throw in another factor into this whole mess here. That politics is always downstream from culture. Now, I wish I could take credit for that, but that's a classic from Andrew Breitbart. And what that means is that culture comes first. Whatever's happening in our society then leads to politics. It is not politics that happens first. So everything that you see happening in your state houses, in the Congress, on talk radio, I mean, I guess maybe talk radio, you could say that that's culture, but it all comes after what's happening in our society.
I'm not sure Breitbart was really the first one either, because I can think of some founding fathers, and I'm sorry I can't name the one specifically, that said you can't have a free society unless it's a moral society. And he's saying, I think, the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think that that's largely the same thing. And I think my point is that if you're a politician and you're trying to force a cultural shift, it is going to fall flat, just like all of this woke stuff. And even the whole movement of the woke, that men can become women and that men and women can become giraffes, or however that works, is absolutely incongruous to what most people believe. And the reason that it fell flat and the best place that you could see it was at school board meetings, that mothers and fathers were up saying, no, you're not going to teach my kids from this pornography book. You're not going to have drag queens reading them stories. And so what it really was an attempt to push policy from the political end instead of from the cultural end. Politics always has to be a reaction to culture, not the other way around, because it won't work that way. And it's why everything that Jasmine Crockett and AOC and all of them are screwing up with. And not that I want to give a hint to the Democrats, but stop with your stupid stuff. We'll finish up in just a second.
U.S. Coin Capital, we hear from Americans across the United States who have a growing concern about the future purchasing power of U.S. paper money. Many Americans are looking for an alternative for long-term capital. For more than 35 years, the people at U.S. Coin Capital have educated American investors on how to properly accumulate United States gold and silver coins. Call us at 1-800-878-2646 or visit us on the web, uscoincapital.com.
Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics.
Some say standing up for what you believe in is being extreme. Ask any woman in Wyoming. They'll tell you this is called courage. The mainstream media claims that holding the line on important issues is being unreasonable. My mom taught me this is called staying true to our principles. In other places, people argue you always have to compromise to get something done. Here in Wyoming, we know that some things are worth protecting at all costs. Some say it's time we give up on the values that made our state great to accommodate toxic culture. I say it's time to stand tall and protect the values that have served Wyoming well for over 134 years. Join Honor Wyoming as we defend and preserve the Wyoming way of life. Find out how you can make a difference today.
Visit honorwyoming.org. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live. I'm David Iverson, documented to be almost always right 99% of the time. In a revelation of the completely blatantly obvious of things that you should do, the Academy Awards has finally decided to require all voters to watch the films that they're rating. And I quote, for 97 years, and I bet none of us could have figured this out, the Academy of Motion Pictures members were allowed to vote for or against movies that none of them had seen. This rule mandating voters watch every movie in every category they vote on will take effect in time for the 98th Academy Awards, which nobody will watch. And ironic that they put on an award show that really nobody wants to pay attention to because they don't watch the movies either. Quote, in a procedural change, Academy members must now watch all nominated films in each category to be eligible to vote in the final round for the Oscars, the Academy announced Monday. All designated nominees will also be included on the final ballot. One of the reasons I don't publish year-end best of lists here at Breitbart News, this is where this is coming from, is due to the fact that I don't see everything. It seems unfair to leave out those unseen titles. But for nearly a century, Oscar voters were not only encouraged to see the movies they were charged with rating, but maybe to actually know what they were talking about. Over the years, Oscars voters have become more and more vocal about admitting that they have not watched every title in every nomination category. Still, they cast a vote. Absolutely nuts. That's like voting for Miss America without bothering to check out the chicks from the other states. Something Agent 29 and I would never do. More ridiculousness coming from the liberal left. Now, Ken, I do have a present for you, which I'm pretty sure you're going to need for this next piece. Here, I brought you the tape. Here you go. You're going to need it. From the Wyoming Turkey Vulture. Laramie County School District Number 1 delays releasing gun policy for comment. And I quote, Laramie County School District Number 1 refrained from putting out a draft gun policy for a public comment this week after the district's lawyers said she hadn't had enough time to consider its legal implications. Per legislation passed earlier this year to repeal gun-free zones across the state, Any adult with a concealed carry permit can lawfully carry on school premises. But following the board's last meeting, 2 drafts of a policy meant to comply with the provisions of House Bill 172 were sent to the district's Policy Advisory Committee for feedback. Listen to this. This is a tight timeline from the end of the session to July 1. Laramie County School District Number 1 attorney Amy Polly told the board, our goal was to have a draft ready for you to vote on and put that 45-day public comment out tonight. Unfortunately, we just weren't able to make that happen. Now, what they're trying to do, Agent 29, is craft a policy to control guns at the local level. Is that what House Bill 172 was all about?
Couple of things there. One of them is at least twice in there that says something about we haven't had enough time. We haven't had enough time. How long have we been working on trying to get rid of gun-free zones in Wyoming?
Years.
Yeah. And what that tells me is they never thought we'd get here.
Absolutely.
That we snuck up on them. We're very sneaky. Another thing out there, you mentioned concealed carry holders, and they're the only ones that can carry in the schools at this point. We've had this comment several times. What's the absolute lowest crime rate group in America, lower than police officers themselves? Concealed carry holders.
Absolutely.
And so you're kind of burying your head in the sand. But this idea, we have in the United States, the states created the federal government. And so the states can tell the federal government what to do.
Theoretically.
Or
yeah.
what they can't do.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the other way around in the states. The states created the municipalities or authorized them or set them up. And the state has preeminence. And when it comes to a fundamental constitutional right, cities, towns, other organizations, government organizations do not have the right to usurp the Wyoming Constitution.
You say that now,
quite clear.
But you apparently have not been at the Laramie County School Board meeting. Take a listen to what they're crafting. You're going to love this one. Quote, these recommendations include metal detectors at large events, biometric locks for staff access, capping ammunition amounts, and regulating the type of weapons allowed by staff, and requiring specific holsters with trigger guards and fasteners to keep firearms secure. She also echoed the need for staff to receive high-intensity training. One of the policies presented was by a local parent, and I talked about this on the program, and I was not happy about it and cut a lot of flack from the Moms for Liberty. But they're crafting a policy that mandates that people who have concealed weapons permits take part in this intensive training, which is, and let's see if it says here, not in this piece, but it's several hours of live fire. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. Was any of that in House Bill 172?
Not that I can recall. I've got nothing against training. I've got hours and hours of training. But to mandate, for example, some arbitrary amount, that's a little bit out there. I want to remind people, Article 1, Section 24, and this is the Wyoming State Constitution, one sentence. The right of citizens to bear arms in defense of themselves and of the state, which I believe would include a state-owned school, shall not be denied, period.
Yep. And I mean, it is absolutely amazing the lengths that the left is going to try to still infringe in every way that they possibly can on your Second Amendment rights. And the truth is, House Bill 172, it said if you have a concealed weapon permit, you can carry it in almost every government building, with the exception of a courtroom, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and House Bill 172, if you want to get technical, in my view, is not constitutional because of what I just read. If I don't have a permit, if I have to go apply and get fingerprinted and everything else to the government, then I don't have a right to defend myself or the state.
Yeah, and that's the sad commentary that surrounds the Second Amendment, that we have to have laws that say you have to follow the Second Amendment. It's absolutely ridiculous. And this is one of the arguments that's been used against, a lot of gun legislation. And it's, and to tell you the truth, I find it kind of ingenious. If I were on the left, I would absolutely use this argument that, wait a minute, you already have the Second Amendment. You don't need this gun bill. Why do we need to pass a bill that says you can carry firearms? because you're not letting us. It's absolutely ridiculous. But the point here, and this kind of goes back to one of the reasons that Mark Gordon, no, it doesn't kind of go back to, it absolutely goes back to one of the reasons Mark Gordon gave for vetoing, and I don't remember the bill number, but the gun-free zones bill last year, that we have to have local control. You don't get local control over the Second Amendment. Yeah, and it was Gordon that signed this one to go through. But the point is that the school board, the city council, the county commissioners, none of those groups get to tell you where you can and can't carry your firearms. And we've allowed them to do this for so long that evidently they think that they can.
Well, the only person that I think should be able to do that is a private individual in his own private property.
Yes.
Or if I have a private business, I can put a sign on the door that says you can't carry here.
Yeah.
And I can walk up to that door and say, well, you're not going to get in my business.
Yeah. Years ago, I was in the Buffalo Wild Wings in Gillette. And I hardly ever carry my firearm, open. I just don't open carry. I think it's a dumb idea. You should carry a concealed weapon. And the simple reason for that is if your weapon is out and something bad happens, you're probably going to be target number one. I'm just smarter to keep it concealed. Well, anyway, this particular day, walked into Buffalo Wild Wings, and I think I'd had a coat on before, and I left the coat in the car. We ordered, got our meal, and then the waitress came over and said, well, I'm sorry, you're going to have to leave. And I said, well, why? And I said, well, you're carrying a firearm. We don't allow firearms in here. And I said, I'll be happy to, and I'll never come back. And I think the only time I've actually been in a Buffalo Wild Wings was with another group of people. But, I agree with you that if you, in your private home, in your private business, yeah, you have the ability to say, I don't want you carrying firearms in my house. And your business is no different than your house. But on the other hand, on the other side of that is, well, I have a right not to come in your business and not to patronize your business. But it is absolutely incredible to me that the Wyoming Education Association, school boards, all of them still think that somehow they have the ability to regulate firearms. And the truth is, they just don't. And as much as they want to try, they just don't get to. The end of this piece ends up like so. Let me get to the last page here. Here we go. Okay, and I quote. We might need to put in language that basically says freedom is only included in this policy if specifically approved of. We don't want to put anything that would contradict what we've been told, but we don't want to jeopardize our property. Okay, whatever. But the law is the law, and House Bill 172 passed, and it was signed by the governor. Well, we burned up another busy broadcast hour on the program. Like I said, we're not going to have a Cowboy State Politics live tomorrow or Friday. Hopefully, I'll be going to Laramie to an event. And if I get to, I will bring you all the news from there. But for now, from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics studio, I'm David Iverson, and this is Cowboy State Politics.